Well, hi, this is Chris. Welcome back. The date today is July 9, 2016, year of our Savior, Jesus Christ. Bible study number 68. Yes, Bible study number 68. The title of this, I know it's surprising, but it's Priestcraft. Once again, Priestcraft Chancel, Priestcraft-Chancel. I'm hoping that my voice will hold up. So, as we left off, we're talking about Mother Goddess worship. This is what it's all about. And I know I'm throwing a lot of stuff, but all this about is it's about the layout of the temple getting to the chancel area, folks. The chancel is where the magic happens. And there's a reason why you have all these symbolic things, because this is a lot of crazy stuff goes in that area. And most of the time we just go through it. We don't even pay attention. We don't even know. That's what the uninitiated do. But understand that Satan doesn't care if you worship your Jesus. He just wants you to worship him, not on what God wants you to do. He wants you to worship Jesus, but also worship the Queen of Heaven. Then he neutralizes you. Or worship Jesus, but worship the other saints as well, which are nothing but another name for worshiping other gods. God says, have no other gods besides me. Okay. Now, Roman Marian churches are religious buildings dedicated to the veneration of the Blessed Virgin. These churches were built throughout the history of the Catholic or Roman Church, and today they can be found on every continent except Antarctica. The history of Marian church architecture tells the unfolding story of the development of the Roman Catholic Mariology. The construction and dedication of the Marian churches is often indicative of the Mariological trends within a period such as a papal reign. For instance, in 1955, rededication of Pope Pius XII of the Church of St. James the Great in Montreal with the new title, Mary, Queen of the World Cathedral, was a reflection of his being called the most Marian Pope. A year earlier, Pope Pius XII had proclaimed that title for the Virgin Mary in 1954 encyclical Ad Caeli Reginem, or encyclical Ad Caeli Reginem on the Vatican website. This encyclical on the Queen of Heaven is an example of how the interplay between churches and Marian art reinforces the effect of Marian devotions. Through the century, the progression of medieval architecture towards Romanesque, Gothic, Renaissance, Baroque, and eventually modern Marian church architectures may be viewed as a manifestation of the growth of Marian belief. That's significant, folks. This is right out of your encyclopedia, okay? It's talking about all these things are centered in Marian worship, Mariology, okay? Now, the only reason why I have access to this information is because, number one, I operate from a precept that God has given us absolute truth. That's how I operate. That God has preserved His Word, and thanks to the Jesuitical worshipers, the Jesuits, they have put this information via the internet. We have access to information more than any time in the history of the entire world. It's significant, and most people would rather watch the Kardashians. So, just as the development of Marian art and music were a reflection of the growing trends in the veneration of the Blessed Virgin Mary in the Roman Catholic Church tradition, a good example of the continuation of Marian traditions from the Gothic period to the present day is found at St. Mary's Basilica in Poland. It's known as the Krakow. I apologize for the mispronunciation there. On every hour, a trumpet signal called the Hejno, meaning St. Mary's Dawn, and pronounced the Hey Now, is still played from the top of the taller St. Mary's two towers, the noontime being heard across Poland and abroad. Now, we see here that popes have at times viewed the existence of Marian churches as a key to the spread of the Marian devotions. Example, as he entrusted Europe to the Virgin Mary, Pope John Paul II stated, thanks to the countless Marian shrines dotting the nations of the continent, devotion to Mary is very strong and widespread among the peoples of Europe, end quote. And that's taken from Wikipedia, Roman Catholic Marian churches. Now we see that the Mother Goddess temple layout will be continued with the discussion of the chancel or sanctuary location where the clergy reside during the officiation of corporate worship to the laity that reside in the nave or navel location of a cruciform temple. All right, we finished another one. Now we're getting into the chancel. The chancel is the most significant aspect to this Roman Christianity. Now, chancel is defined as, now in Middle English, from the Middle French, from the late Latin cancellus or lattice, from the Latin cancelli, from the lattice work enclosing it, the part of a church lying east of the nave and including the choir and sanctuary. So you enter through the vestibule, you're going down the nave, and then you get to the transept, right? And then you go through the transept, and then you go into the chancel area, which is located in liturgical east. Okay? You're going west to east, and that's when you kneel down, you're facing the east, which is symbolic of the sun. Mm-hmm. And you go, well, it could be remaining to Jesus. I understand that. But understand that this is all mixed with paganism. When you have mixed Christianity with paganism, most likely it's controlled by the god of this world, and you don't even know it. Okay? Now, number one, in church architecture, quote, the chancel is the space around the altar, including the choir and the sanctuary, sometimes called the presbytery, at the liturgical east end of a traditional Christian church building. And that's taken from a Dictionary of Architecture and Landscape Architecture, Oxford University Press. It may terminate in an apse. Now remember, an apse is Latin from apsis or arch or vault, from the Greek, usually hemispherical vault or semidome known as the exedra. The term is applied to a semicircular or polygonal termination of the main building at the liturgical east end where the altar is, regardless of the shape of the roof, which may be flat, sloping, domed, or hemispherical. Now, we see that is generally the area used by the clergy and choir during the worship while the congregation is in the nave. So we see in the chancel or the presbytery, that's where the clergy reside. Now you have a plan with a broader definition of the chancel is highlighted. This is all done. This is all put forth in our Bible study. Then you have the stricter definition is where it's more centrally located, and then you have the ambulatory, which is an area located around the altar. Now this is one definition, sometimes called the strict one, and a practice in churches where the eastern end contains other elements such as an ambulatory, and that's where ambulatory where you can move, that's what that means, where you can walk around the altar, that's what that means. In smaller churches where the altar is backed by the outside east wall and there is no distinct choir, the chancel and the sanctuary may be the same. In churches with a retrochoir area, also called a retrochoir, that's behind the altar, this may only be included in the broader definition of the chancel. So they have a broader and a stricter definition, but this is basically where the area where the clergy reside and where the altar resides. Remember, when you have a pastor saying you need an altar for lawful or corporate worship, well, he's right, because you're dealing with paganism. You're dealing with Roman Christianity. If you're dealing with biblical Christianity, where's the altar? Where's the altar, folks? It's in your body. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's your heart. I don't know. But no, they go, no, you have to go to the pagan temple concept, and you got to enter through here, and then you have to have a clergy, and then they have to be located in the very Holy of Holies where the altar resides. Okay? Now, in a cathedral or other large church, there may be a distinct choir area at the start of the chancel looking from the nave before reaching the sanctuary, and an ambulatory may run beside and behind it. All these may be included in the chancel, at least in the architectural terms. Excuse me. In many churches, the altar has now been moved to the front of the chancel in what was built as the choir area. So you got different modifications, but grasp the concept. The chancel may be a step or two higher than the level of the nave, and the sanctuary is often raised still further. The chancel is very often separated from the nave by altar rails or a rood screen, a sanctuary bar, or an open space, and its width and roof height is often different from that of the nave. Usually the chancel will be narrower and lower. So when you get into the chancel area, you're going to have possibly steps going up to an altar. Well, if you get into Exodus chapter 20, it talks about don't have steps up to an altar in the Old Testament because that is a mark of paganism. God forbids it. So we see in churches with a traditional Latin cross plan and a transept and central crossing, the chancel usually begins at the eastern side of the central crossing, often under an extra large chancel arch supporting the crossing and the roof. This is an arch which separates the chancel from the nave and transept of a church. And that's taken from an illustrated dictionary of historic architecture. If the chancel, strictly defined as choir and sanctuary, does not fill the full width of a medieval church, there will usually be some form of low wall or screens at its sides, demarcating it from the ambulatory or parallel side chapels. As well as the altar, the sanctuary may house a credence table and seats for officiating and assisting ministers. In some churches, the congregation may gather on three sides of a semicircle around the chancel. Very complex, isn't it? About the temple layout, made with hands. I have to know all these different things. I mentioned the credence or credence table. That's where you have the non-consecrated bread and wine before it goes to the altar. I'm just getting ahead of myself. But all that takes place in the chancel area. Now, in early Christianity architecture, the templum, coming from the word temple in the Greek, is a feature of Byzantine churches consisting of a barrier separating the nave from the sacraments at the altar. Now, this was a barrier dividing off the sanctuary from the rest of the church. In Eastern Christianity, this developed into different arrangements from those of the Western Church, with the sanctuary often not visible by the congregation. In the West, the ciborium, an open-walled, usually roofed structure sheltering the altar, became common and was originally fitted with curtains that were drawn and pulled back at different points in the Mass in a way that some Oriental Orthodox churches still practice today. So what they're saying is in the chancel area, especially in the Greek Orthodox or the Orthodox, Oriental Orthodox churches, it was fenced off. You couldn't actually see the altar in the chancel area. That was a lot of times to prevent people from desecrating that site and things like that. Now, the Western was deviating or evolving different from the East. And that's where you get the ciborium. Now, if you've ever been to St. Peter's Basilica, they have what's called a ciborium or a baldachin. Now, it's beautiful. And the thing must be like 3 stories high. It's unbelievable. It has this canopy over the altar. It's freestanding, 4 pillars. In ecclesiastical architecture, a ciborium in Greek is a canopy or covering supported by columns freestanding in the sanctuary that stands over and covers the altar in a basilica or other church. It may also be known, more general term, as a baldachin. Now, a large or deep chancel made most sense in monasteries and cathedrals where there was a large number of singing clergy and boys from a choir school to occupy the choir. In many orders, choir monk was a term used to distinguish the educated monks who had taken full vows or were training to do so from another class called lay brothers, or other terms, who had taken lesser vows and did mostly manual tasks, including farming the monastery's land. These usually sat in the nave with any lay congregation. Remember nave equals laity equals lay equals mass. That's the unprofessional. Following the exposition of the doctrine of transubstantiation, that's actually where the priest actually, through a magical ceremony, changes the substance of the bread and wine into the actual body and blood of Jesus. Following the exposition of the doctrine of the transubstantiation at the Fourth Lateran Council of 1215, clergy were required to ensure that the Blessed Sacrament was to be kept protected from irreverent access or abuse, and accordingly, the area of the clergy used by the lay congregation was to be screened off from that used by the clergy. This distinction was enforced by the development of canon law, by which the construction and upkeep of the chancel was the responsibility of the rector, whereas the construction and upkeep of the nave was the responsibility of a parish. Now, what's a rector? A rector is a leader, clergyman, cleric, a Roman Catholic priest directing a church, the head of a university or school. That's where you get these terms. Now, a parish is a church territorial unit consisting of a division within a diocese under the pastoral care and clerical jurisdiction of a parish priest. Now you see that barriers are demarcating the chancel became increasingly elaborate, but were largely swept away after the Protestant Reformation, and then the Counter-Reformation prioritized the congregation having a good view of what was happening in the chancel. Now, and as you can see here, the Bernini's St. Peter's Baldachin, 1620s, actually a ciborium, was hugely influential on the latter ciboria. This is the high altar located in St. Peter's Basilica in the Vatican, Rome. Now continuing the quote, now the low communion rail is generally the only barrier despite being essentially a counter-Reformation invention. This has proved useful and accepted in the Protestant churches that dispense communion. However, the screen enjoyed a small revival in the 19th century after the passive urgings of Augustus Pugin, who wrote a treatise on the chancel screens and rood lofts. Let me stop right there in this quote. Now understand that you had these barriers blocking off the nave where the laity reside from the clergy or the chancel area. But after you had the Protestant coming forth, what do you have? The Counter-Reformation. Counter means it's against the Reformation. The Counter-Reformation means Roman Catholicism. It means Jesuits. It means the Council of Trent, Vatican I, Vatican II. They're all words that are interconnected. It is a Roman Catholic invention, the altar rail. Okay? And that way you can look and see the high altar residing in the chancel area where only the clergy reside who've gone through seminary. Pun intended, folks. Mm-hmm. Because that's what it is. Because only the trained clergy can go through the cervix into the womb. Because the chancel area is the womb area. And be honest with you, folks, when you're dealing with a woman and the seed of a man comes in through the cervix into the uterus or womb or matrix of a woman, and you have the seed and egg combined, it truly is magic. It's creation. It's amazing. God's design. It's beautiful. So Satan's going to take that and twist it and create and use that in religion. Okay. But understand that when you kneel before an altar rail, it is Counter-Reformation. It is a Roman Catholic invention. And what are you doing? You're kneeling before man. You're kneeling before the professional priesthood. Okay? Now, continuing the quote. After the Reformation, Protestant churches generally moved the altar, now often called the communion table, forward typically to the front of the chancel, and often used lay choirs who were placed in a gallery at the west end. The rear of deep chancels became little used in churches surviving from the Middle Ages, and new churches very often omitted one. With the emphasis on sermons and their audibility, some churches simply converted their chancels to seat part of the congregation. So it evolves, okay? It evolves. It's moving forward. In the 19th century England, one of the battles of the Cambridge Camden Society, the architectural wing of the Anglo-Catholics in the Church of England, was to restore the chancel as a necessary part of the church. Now, what is an Anglo-Catholic, folks? An Anglo-Catholic is beliefs and practices within Anglicanism that emphasize the Catholic heritage and identity of the various Anglican churches. So it's saying, hey, we want to go back to the traditional put forth by the mother. We're a daughter of the mother. That's basically what it's saying. That's Anglo-Catholic. Now, by pushing the altar back to its medieval position, that was the Middle Ages, that was dominated by Roman Catholicism, and having the choir used by a lay choir, they were largely successful in this, although the harder end of a high church objected to allowing a large group of laity into the chancel. Now, look up the definition of high church in your collegiate dictionary. You'll find it fascinating because it mentions sacerdotalism. It mentions rites, rituals, and ceremonies, liturgy, all that stuff, but all that stuff was really Roman Catholic. Okay? Now, different approaches to worship in the 20th century again tended to push altars in larger churches forward to be closer to the congregation, and the chancel again risks being a less used area of the church. The word chancel derives from the French word usage of chancel from the late Latin word cancellus or lattice. And that's taken from the Dictionary of Architecture and Landscape Architecture at Oxford University Press. Now understand that that's what chancel is, this lattice work separating. Chancel is this lattice work separating what? The laity from the clergy. See, Satan wants to convince you, and you choose to be the laity. And you go, oh, I'm just a dumb laity. I got to go to my minister, and he has to tell me how to think. I kneel before my God. I kneel before my vicar. That's not... Did the disciples kneel before Jesus? Jesus kneeled before his disciples. Isn't it amazing? So, this refers to the typical form of rood screens. The chancel was formerly known as the presbytery. Presbytery and chancel, these are Presbyterian is mentioned in your New Testament, but Satan twists the meanings, as he always does. So now we're looking in this Roman Christianity as chancel and presbytery are words used interchangeably. Okay, presbytery was the part of the church reserved for the officiating clergy, okay? Because it was reserved for the clergy. And all that's taken from Chancel under Wikipedia. Really good information. So let's break this down. Let's review it. Uterus, womb, matrix. Think of the movie Matrix. Most people are they're in this church corporation, and they don't even know. They're so brainwashed and indoctrinated. So coming out of the Matrix is a good thing, because that's what Jesus said. Come out of Babylon. Come out of Mystery Babylon. Come out of her. Okay? So the anatomical correlation to the chancel area in a Christian temple is the uterus, representing the womb of the mother goddess. This was the personification of nature, motherhood, creation, and fertility. Mariology, or veneration to the mother goddess Mary, strongly influenced the architecture of the Middle and even modern era of today. The Romanesque and Gothic architecture reigned supreme during the medieval ages, producing large numbers of Christian monasteries, abbeys, churches, parishes, and cathedrals throughout Europe. The Sheila na gig iconography found in the Romanesque Christian churches scattered throughout Europe, specifically in Ireland, Great Britain, France, Spain, Switzerland, Norway, Belgium, and even in the Czech Republic, reveal the universal or Catholic veneration of the Mother Goddess. The Sheila na gigs, or female figures with exaggerated vulvas found on churches throughout Europe, represent the yoni worship and is revealed through the symbol of the Vesca Pisces or the ichthys. The concept of the Mother Church or Universal Church is a term used by Roman Catholicism as the Holy Mother Church or Sancta Mater, see Matrix, Ecclesia or Sacred Mother Church. Quote, in Christianity, a mother church is the church considered as a mother in its functions of nourishing and protecting the believer. Takes from Oxford English Dictionary, end quote, and that's taken from Wikipedia, Mother Church. Now, if you look and notice the cruciform or forming or arranging in the form of a cross layout of the Mother Church of St. Peter's Basilica in Vatican City, Rome. City within a city. Basilica, noun. Latin from the Greek basiliki, from the feminine of basilikos or royal, from basileus, which means king. Number one, an oblong building ending in a semicircular asp used in ancient Rome, especially for a court of justice and place of public assembly. Number two, an early Christian church building consisting of nave and aisles with a clerestory and a large high transept from which an apse projects. Number three, a Roman Catholic church or cathedral given ceremonial privileges. And that's taken from Basilica, Webster's 7th New Collegiate Dictionary, 1967, page 72. The basilica represents the womb of the Queen of Heaven, or Our Lady, or Star of the Sea. The uterus, from Latin, uterus, plural of uteri, or uterine, or womb, is a major female hormone responsive reproductive sex organ of most mammals, including humans. One end, the cervix, opens into the vagina, while the other is connected to one or both fallopian tubes, uterine tubes, depending on the species. It is within the uterus that the fetus develops during gestation, usually developing completely in placental males, such as humans. In English, the term uterus is used consistently within the medical and related professions, while the Germanic-derived term womb is more common in everyday usage. The uterus is located inside the pelvis, immediately dorsal and usually somewhat rostral to the urinary bladder and ventral to the rectum. Human uterus is pear-shaped, about 3 inches, 7.6 centimeters long, 4.5 centimeters broad side to side, and 3.0 centimeters thick anter-posterior. A non-pregnant adult uterus weighs about 60 grams. The uterus can be divided anatomically into 4 segments: the fundus, corpus, cervix, and the internal os. We'll pick it up. We'll run out of time, folks, but it's fascinating. Stay tuned for more exciting priestcraft. God bless.